Hello, mis cielitos, and welcome back. Coco is here with the first recording of the year, the first upload, and hopefully I'll be wrapping up Raging Loop with this one. As I mentioned before, I debated for a while whether to show some of the extra scenes, extra dialogue that will be shown in the new mode after having beaten the game. Will not be doing that. Really encourage anyone who is interested to get the game. I think it's well worth it. And then you can re-experience it yourself without my commentary and with the ability to listen to the original voice acting, which I'm sure is great. But hey, Happy New Year's to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. Very much appreciate having you around. Mitsuji hesitated. It would be like revealing an ace up her sleeve. Could she really trust this woman?
疑ってるって顔ね。いいわ。もし話してくれるなら、私も自分の能力をあなたに詳しく明かすから。
Looks like you don't trust me. Very well. If you do tell me, then I'll reveal my own ability to you. That'd be nice. Is it a secret to looking as young as you do at whatever age you are? I'd like that.
失礼な子ね。まあ、化粧のテクは応用が効くから、別途教えてもいいけど。あなた、素材は可愛いし。
So rude. Well, if you want to know my makeup techniques, I can tell separately. But you're already naturally cute. Normally, Mitsuji had no interest in her femininity. If pressed, she'd say she'd wish she'd been born a guy, and her sexual orientation leaned that way to some degree. It was for that reason that her Jinx avatar, the sheep, sounded like a guy. Okay, that's pretty cool. Interesting. So I'm a little unsure what they mean by her sexual orientation leaned that way, because gender identity and sexual orientation are two completely separate things. Like, I assume... I assume they mean that she wished she'd been born a guy and was also just interested in guys. Fine, I'll tell you. Worst case, I'll punish you with a nightmare until you die.
そりゃ、ご勘弁願いたいわね。せいぜい漏らさないように注意する。
Oh my. I would appreciate it if you didn't. I'll be careful not to let anyone else know. It was at this point Mitsuji successfully set a secret trap to seal her superior in a dream if she went against her word. What was so terrifying about the sheep was that it could do that. I treaded on thin ice twice. The first was when that idiot screwed up. The second was when that idiot intentionally screwed up. I see. Well, simply put, I forced myself into the resurrected spider's head and stole a glance at a snapshot of the starting point. Uematsu had already fulfilled her goal, so she didn't need to press the reset button again. It was only at those times that I did a reality alteration.
雲の記憶したその瞬間をあなたが夢として練り上げ、それを現実と差し替えたのね。
You refined that moment in the spider's memory into a memory and swapped it with reality, huh? Yeah, more accurately, I returned both the spider and that idiot's memories to the start, because he needed those memories. To make him agree easily without having him notice the unnatural moment of the swap, she had literally killed Haruaki. Not that she needed to say that, nor did she feel bad about it.
聞く限りでは相当の大技のようだけど、よく植松里香子に気づかれなかったわね。
I feel like I should be using... oh well. It was a bold move for sure, but I'm surprised Rikaku Uematsu didn't notice. Well, a dream wielder is, in a manner of speaking, in a constant state of delusion. I figured she'd let a little deja vu slide. I thought she'd chalk off that scene of her finally achieving her desire to resurrect the Tsuchigumo as just a dream.
それで一旦は納得したと。
And for a while, she did. But the last time pushed it too far. The memory the spider had almost forgotten of its first success mixed in with me and Haruaki's memories and was recycled. As a result, I ended up creating a dream that went back further in real time. The spider could clearly notice the abnormality of that.
気づかれたと。
So she caught on, you mean? Yeah. She probably had no idea that someone with a similar power was operating in secret, so close to her. But once she did, it all clicked. After all, my opponent had super senses and super intelligence that bring military satellites to shame. I may be the sheep, but there's only so much I can do on my own. Still, I endured for 2 days. After that, my avatar was defeated, and I was down for the count.
それだけど、あなたは能力行使に際してアバターを必要とするのよね。他の家畜もそうなの？
About that, you need to use your avatar whenever you use your powers, right? Are the rest of the cattle the same? Yeah, there are tons like that. After all, they motivated us with the concepts of a pasture and cattle ever since we were kids. Images of model animals are clear, and it's best to link them deeply with your own imagination. That way, it naturally takes shape.
となると S 型または G 型。獣のモデルにするならまあ妥当かしら。
Which makes some sloth and gluttony types. I suppose it's appropriate to use animal models. Sounds like the sort of thing the academia would say.
これでもディアグノーザーの学会資格は持ってるから私。
Well, I am an academia qualified diagnoser, despite my position.
しかしアバターをやられてよく無事だったわね。それ以来能力に支障が残ったりしなかった？
Still, I'm surprised you made it out okay after the defeat of your avatar. Were there any further complications with your power after that? The core of the diabolicities of our avatars or metamorphs are designed to not get damaged by those power-based hazards.
なるほど。トカゲの尻尾か。本体の生存を最優先とし、脱出と再決起の瞬間を待つ。
I see. So it's like a lizard's tail. The life of the main body is prioritized, and you wait for the moment to escape and get back up on your feet again.
マジで世界を救う戦争なんて起こそうとしてたの？
Were they seriously trying to cause a war to save the world? I've got no clue what the pasture was thinking. After all, you guys or someone else already killed them. However, the terminal cattle and their candidates believed it. That they would save the world. That the salvation pasture would spread across the world.
ふむ。そっちの話も興味深いけど、まずは報告をどうするかね。
That's a very interesting topic. But let's take care of the report first. Yeah, good idea.
ふむ。わかった。こうしましょう。あ
Hmm,
なたは何もしなかった。
okay. Let's go with this. You did nothing. Huh?
状況的に植松里香子の中にも矛盾した気持ちがあったのは間違いない。
Situationally,
それが形をとって現れた。
there's no doubt that Rikako Uematsu had conflicting emotions. That's why they took on form and appeared.
その植松里香子の前世みたいなものが、久石春明や 芹沢千恵美を導いて、最終的に土雲を敗北させた。
Then, Rikako Uematsu's innate goodness or something guided Haruaki Fusaishi and Chiemi Serizawa and eventually resulted in the Tsuchigumo's defeat. Then, what will you say about me?
基本すべてのループをコンビニ店員としてぼーっと過ごしたって感じかしら。
Let's just say you basically spent all the loops sitting around as a convenience store employee. That's too cruel. I know we can't tell the truth, but at least give me a major role.
あらら要注意。人間が失敗する原因のベスト3に入るのが功名心よ。目立たないでいいのは幸運と思わなきゃ。
Now, just so you know, ambition is one of the top 3 causes of failure. Consider it fortunate you don't stand out. Alright.
にしても、あの二人もちょっと注意すべきね。
Still, those two should be careful. Yeah, I guess. Honestly, in all honesty, Mitsuji still had feelings for Haruaki. Her relationship with him had awakened, allowed her to exhibit a femininity she never knew she had. It annoyed and embarrassed her whenever she thought about it, and she never wanted to be in a situation like that again. But when she was with Haruaki, he'd allowed her to be all that. She dated him with feelings so fresh, she felt like a completely different person. So she couldn't deny that for her, who had been living a double life as a spy for the project at the time, their relationship had been very relaxing. Nor could she deny that the 2 years she'd spent talking to him were now part of her life. However, she also knew that she wasn't the type to be tied down. If they'd kept dating, Haruaki would likely have realized the truth about her and proceeded to interrogate her non-stop. For that was his nature. He would have certainly been led to the project and the jinxes as a result. And then he would have ruined himself. No doubt about it. His disposition was simply that twisted and antagonistic. Whenever he did an activity he considered scary or interesting, he would always give the person he was facing off against a bad time. It was a nasty, cursed fate, like that of a protagonist of a story. If she were just an ordinary woman, that would have been fine. Revealing the secrets of neighbors and internal company affairs didn't always lead to life-threatening danger. But in the extraordinary life that Mitsuji lived, he would have been erased before long by someone with conflicting interests, and loath as she was to admit it, he didn't want that. Well, the biggest reason she broke up with him was because the war between her desire to kill him and her desire to bask more in their relationship had finally come to a close. The black sesame pudding had been the trigger for that, and in the end, she couldn't reach a compromise with the part of her who'd curl up in his arms and cry. It might be too late for that, though.
彼はもう手遅れかもしれないわね。
It might be too late for him, though. Mitsuji was stunned, feeling like her mind had been read. The mug her superior handed over was full of tepid coffee. What are you talking about? Mitsuji had long since stopped acting polite for formality's sake around her superior, but she felt this was an appropriate sense of distance.
彼、超常現象に深入りしすぎたでしょ。あなたの正体も半ば知ったわけだし、契約は成立したと思うべきでしょう。
He's gotten in too deep with supernatural phenomena. He had an inkling of the truth about you. We should assume he's formed a contract.
今後彼はジンクス使いとして目覚めるかもしれない。
In the future, he may awaken as a Jinx user. Or maybe he's already awakened.
え?
Hmm? There's an archetype known as the detective, right?
あれは超強力な無実化特化能力者か、あるいはジンクス無効化の現実改変者を示すアーキタイプよ。
That refers to dream writing specialization users, or Jinx nullifying reality warpers. I keep flipping between them. Yeah, I know. They're a kind of people who turn Jinx incidents into real incidents through extreme sophism. That's basically what happened with this one, wasn't it?
まあ、表向きはね。でも、あなたがこう証言しているんだから。
Officially, at least. But your testimony says otherwise. But due to various reasons, there will be no records of it, right?
ありえなくもないかもね。ちょっと注目した方がいいのかも。
It might be possible. You should probably be careful.
ただ、私はむしろ芹沢千恵美の方が危ない気がする。あの子の神を殺す力、どう思う?
I feel Chiemi Serizawa is the dangerous one. What do you think of her god-slaying power? And doesn't that depend on her definition of a god?
そりゃそうだけど、ジンクス的に言えば、悪魔的な存在を無条件で知覚して殺せるとかなったら、かなりやばい。
I suppose. But in Jinx terms, if she can perceive and kill a demon-like entity, that'll be very dangerous. A demon, huh? I don't think the god she spoke of was that sort of entity. From a Jinx standpoint, humans who traveled too far down the path of deviancy were called demons. It was a hypothetical concept of a person who'd lost practically all ability to form relationships with humans, to the point where they couldn't even perceive them anymore. However, there were plenty of deviants who alluded to the existence of demons, so they probably existed. It was just hard to prove. On the other hand, the god Haruaki had explained afterwards over the phone seemed to be a type of concept, completely different from Jinx's. It was more of an alien or a real ghost.
そっちは録音テープ聞いたから、だいたい理解はしてるつもりだけど、まあ確かにね。
I've heard the recording, so I'd like to believe I understand it for the most part. But I suppose you're right.
人間に知覚されることで活性化、電波、変異する知的存在。どっちかっていうと SF の世界の話みたい。
A mind-based entity that activates, multiplies, and mutates by being perceived by humans. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi story. According to Haruaki's definition, Uematsu's Tsuchigumo was apparently a type of god, but Chiemi never noticed it, right? In Jinx terms, the Tsuchigumo can be explained with DD. It'd be better to consider it something else entirely, though.
それは植松里香子が神内明神の信仰で隠蔽してたとも考えられるけど、悪魔と神は別物の線が濃厚か。
It's likely that Rikako Uematsu was hiding it behind her Shinai's faith. But... The idea that the demons and gods are different things is highly possible.
でも、もしそんな神が実在したとして、これまで世界のどこからも似たような分析が出てこなかったのはなぜかしら。
But if gods like that exist, then why have we not seen anything similar to them in the world?
藤吉村は特殊な環境だったけど、あそこにだけ神がいたっていうのも不自然な話に思えるわ。
Fujiyoshi may be a peculiar environment, but it just seems unnatural that they'd be the only one with gods. Hey, have you ever heard this story?
なになに？エッチな話？
Oh, is it a perverted story? Where'd that come from? No, of course not! That's not the kind of person you are, right?
いやー、私くらい逸脱しちゃうと、たまに意識してキャラ崩さないと、行動パターンが確一化されてやばいのよ。
Well, you're as much of a deviant as me. You need to consciously act out of character every now and then. Otherwise, your behavioral patterns are endangered of standardizing. Anyway, the story is about the people who carved laws into this world.
何それ？牧場限定の話？
What's that? Is it a pasture exclusive? It might be, I guess. It is a Jinx-related story, after all. Humans become demons when they deviate too far. Those demons can only be seen by their contractors. But those who boast about forming contracts with demons possess incredible Jinx powers.
そういう話もあるわね。
I've heard the stories. Isn't it strange? You should need mutual understanding with a contract in order to use your Jinx powers. If you can get that kind of power from an invisible source, wouldn't that completely turn that assumption on its head?
一応、ジンクス理論はあくまで他の理論と同様、仮説に過ぎないわ。
Just to reiterate, the Jinx theory is nothing more than a hypothesis, like all the other theories.
そもそも、ジンクス的能力のすべてが単一の理論で定義できるかも相当怪しい状況なんだから、それは。
In the first place, the idea that a single theory can define all Jinx powers is fairly fishy. This story tells the opposite. It says that demons don't break off from the world. They almost assimilate with it instead. Jinxes are the power to warp common sense. That's why they're linked to madmen, and why they are barred from normal society from the start. But if an invisible entity, not some lunatic, used a power, it would be really hard to recognize it as a lie or a trick. Demons are already being accepted by the world, which makes them harder to see as a result. If we go with this line of thinking, then, what happens to a demon that's reached the extreme?
世界に法則を刻むって、もしかして。
By carves laws into the world, do you mean... Yep, that Jinx is incorporated into the laws of the world, and no one finds it strange anymore. Incidentally, I was taught that such a demon becomes a law. For example, when the man called Newton became a law, this world became ruled by Newtonian physics. Stories like that. Wow, this is this is opening up a huge can of worms.
おお、大胆すぎる説ね。過分にして聞いたことがなかったわ。
Wow, that's quite a daring theory. I can't say I've ever heard it before.
それだと、太古の自然科学者や思想家が何らかの法をもたらしたから、現在の世界の秩序があるってことかしら。
Perhaps the reason the modern world has systems is because ancient natural scientists and thinkers brought about their own laws. Exactly. And that's not all. Perhaps the being known as Adam became a law and gave birth to Zugami.
まさに魔法みたいな話ね。
It sounds just like magic. Yeah, that's why we need to bring about the law known as joy to this world.
なるほど。テロリストに与えるにはもってこいの壮大で理想じみてて一発逆転主義な筋書きだわ。
I see. How magnificent, idealistic, and extreme. Perfect for terrorists.
で、それが今までの話と 何の関係があるっていうの？
So, what does that have to do with what we were talking about? Right. The situation's different, of course. I just don't have a good feeling about this. Because that idiot Haruaki gave the god, Chiemi had vaguely perceived a clear definition this time.
待って。嫌な予感が私もしてきた。
Ooh, wait. Now I'm getting a bad feeling too. If the laws of the world can be changed after the fact, whether by a demon or something else, and maybe Haruaki's definition of God will take a turn for the worse, and we'll start seeing those sorts of gods pop up everywhere.
いやいやいや、さすがに飛躍しすぎだから。
No, you're making way too much of a leap there. True, Haruaki might be a little different from a detective. He doesn't deny the existence of the unfathomable after all. Rather, he has the power to make the unfathomable real by coming up with explanations for them that are compatible with the real world.
笑えない。
That's not funny. It sure as hell ain't. Still, I wonder. It's still a bother in its own right, but maybe it won't even intersect all too much with our world.
そうかしら。ジンクス使いはね、無意味なすれ違いをあまりしないものよ。
Perhaps. Jinx users don't usually cross paths for no reason. Which is why you think we'll definitely see each other again.
そうよ。だって私たちは強くなるために自分で世界を狭くすることしかできないもの。
That's right. After all, the only way we can get stronger is to make the world smaller.
現にあなたは破局した後、何の打ち合わせもしないままここで彼と再会し、それが事件解決につながっている。
You, in fact, found yourself unexpectedly meeting your ex again after you broke up, and he became the key to resolving the incident. Mitsuji didn't object. She herself had found it unnatural. It could only be explained by a Jinx-like interpretation of their relationship.
この先きっとことさら困難なタイミングで彼らと再会するのよ。助けになるか、さらにややこしくなるかはわからないけど。
I'm sure you meet them again at a particularly troubling time in the future. Though I don't know if they'll help or just make things more complicated. Ugh, stop it. That kind of hypothesis holds no water.
そんなことはないわ。少なくとも私はあらゆる悪い想像をしておかなきゃならない立場にあるし。
That's not true. At the very least, you're in a position where you have to imagine all kinds of evils.
超科学理論を現実化するジンクスか。もしそんなアーキタイプがあるとすれば、どう名付けるべきかしら。
A jinx that turns parascientific theories into reality, huh? What would we even call an archetype like that? A magician?
言えて妙ね。
What a fitting name. Tired of talking, the pair both brought the cold coffee to their lips at the exact same time, like mirror images. It was instant. He'd also put sugar in without asking. Not that Mitsuji was complaining.
とりあえず、今聞きたいのはこんなところかしら。あとはそっちでもまとめられるわよね。
Anyway, that's more or less what I wanted to ask you. You can sum up the rest, can't you? Yeah, however.
何？
What? How do we explain how Rikaku Amatsu lost her entire jinx at the 11th hour? It's not impossible to lose a jinx, but at that timing and when the lights went out, it's contrived. Plain and simple. All I can come up with is that someone intervened.
知ってるでしょ？藤吉村の他の住人は白だったって、バスガイドに偽装したうちの子が言ってた。
You should know that the other residents of Fujiyoshi were cleared. Our agent disguised as a bus guide told us as much. Well, there were some deviants, right?
そうね。牧島春に鴨志田近持両名ともあの現場にもいたし、神に関する貴重なサンプルなのは疑いないわ。
True, Harumakishima and Chikamochi Kamoshida were both on the scene. There's no doubt they're vital samples related to God.
得体の知れない強力なジンクスらしいし、その神が働きかけて雲を消滅させたってのがいい線じゃない？
Didn't that God, apparently a mysterious and powerful jinx, exert its influence, annihilating the spider? Well, that's the only conclusion I can come to. By the way, what's the church planning to do with them?
別に普通の注意すべき一般人と同じ扱いよ。人を差し向けて遠巻きに監視することになるんじゃないかな。
Nothing much. We'll keep an eye on them, but they'll be treated like normal people otherwise. I suppose they'll send people to observe them from afar. I wonder if those sorts of standard methods will work on that so-called God.
ずいぶん神を危険視してるのね。
You're being quite cautious of God, aren't you? Well, we did have a faith, you know. I want to show those labeled gods respect and caution. At the very least, the Salvation Pasture Project had incorporated concepts and values from Abrahamic religion. There was also the reason why all the cattle were born on December 25. On paper, anyway. To symbolize they were all messiahs in the making.
半神論的な神はいわゆるヤハウェやアッラーのような唯一神とは本質的に異なる概念とも聞くわよ。
I've heard that pantheist gods and so-called monotheistic gods, like Yahweh and Allah, are essentially different concepts. That doesn't matter. What's important for us is to know who it is that created the world, provides tribulations, and holds the right to destroy. Do you know why it was that the project was formed?
終末論的テロリズムによって自分たちの理想郷を作るためと理解しているけど。
As I understand it, to create their own utopia through eschatological terrorism. I can't completely deny that. But on the other hand, the ranchers in charge of the pasture probably seriously believed the end was near.
だから本気で救世を？
So they were serious in their mission for salvation. Yeah, they didn't know how the end would come, so they cultivated many cattle.
言っとくけど、そういう妄想で事件を起こすやつはジンクス社会の外にも中にも山ほどいるからね。
Just so you know, there are many people who cause incidents due to delusions like that, both in and out of Jinx society. I know. Well, it wouldn't hurt if we were idiots who couldn't escape those cases. Also, you church guys or whatever should just protect the world. That's the duty of the wolf who attacked the pasture.
狼ね。
The wolf, huh? Feeling her companion's eyes boring right into her, Mitsuji sipped her coffee, leaned back in her office chair, and looked up at the ceiling. At the Salvation Pastures project, wolf was a code that referred to two things. The first referred to a case where either the project was exposed, or an investigation or attack that could have a great impact on the progression of the project came from the authorities or the academia. When they said the wolf is coming, the cattle and those associated with the project were to quickly escape and go into hiding. Or so they were supposed to. But in the end, that had backfired due to sleeper agents and defectors, and the project was totally destroyed. The DD, Design and Diabolicity production project, a complete first in history, may have created many with unprecedented powers, but it was lacking in intelligence. The other was a mere legend whispered only amongst the cattle. The cattle who specialized in killing cattle. That, or it was a plan to deal with the cattle capable of destroying the world who had already been released into it. Whatever the case, it was a word that symbolized fear and hostility to the cattle. In other words, Fenrir, the world-killing wolf. However, according to all the Central Intelligence, Mitsuji had come into contact with working as an intelligence officer for the project. No such thing existed. She would have no way of finding such information if it only existed in the brains of a select few of the top brass, including the ranchers, but it didn't seem likely to her. That said, an aberrant like Mitsuji didn't think it was impossible for there to be an aberrant Jinx user like that. If there were such a user, he'd probably come across them eventually due to the bond linking Jinx users, and if she did, all she could do was fight to the best of her ability. When she thought of that, an idea suddenly came to Mitsuji. It was a trifling idea. No. A memory. Hey, you have the list of those who live in Fujiyoshi, and those who were there at the time of the extrication.
そりゃ。っていうか、報告書にまとめるようで、まとめてメールしたじゃない。
Huh? Well, wait, didn't I email that to you along with all the other materials for you to use for the report? Oh, did you? Hey, you're right.
いきなりどうしたの?
What's got it into you? Recollection immediately became an unpleasant conviction. Someone's missing.
Eh?
Huh? Fujiyoshi currently has 11 residents. There was an old man there who died. 2 journalists came from the outside. Add Chiemi, who was visiting back from the city, and that's 14 people. Add that idiot Haruaki, and you've got 15. But according to him, the Feast of the Yomi Purge had 16 people in it at most.
まずい見落としね。リストから欠けてるのは誰?
That's a bad oversight. Who's missing from the list? I don't know. Through my avatar, I saw a 4-year-old girl there.
子供? そんな住人いないわよ。
A child? There are no children that young amongst the residents. Then she came from the outside.
そんな子供が一人で? 一体どんな事情?
A child that young? By herself? Under what circumstances would she... The woman's words trailed off for the same reason as Mitsuji. Hey, from your experience, does that thing where Jinx users conveniently cross paths due to their shared bond happen frequently?
ひどくよくあることね。
Yes, quite frequently. Was there a 4-year-old girl who had escaped from the pasture?
あなたに伝えることには抵抗があるわ。
I'm not sure I should tell you. I'm a fugitive. I have no intention of going back at this point. Besides, you know that regrouping is the sheepdog's job, right? Mitsuji had already gone over what the project's plan was if the wolf came. To suspend it and flee. In those situations, everyone was supposed to scatter in different, random directions. After all, if an escape route had existed, the fugitives would all be rounded up if that ever leaked. In preparation for the arrival of the wolf, the Jinx user was designed for the purpose of regathering the cattle. That was the sheepdog. The sheepdog was cattle kept under a heavy veil of secrecy, and Mitsuji had never met them. But in the end, they'd been caught, and were now collaborating with the academia, so this meticulous plan had grown moot. Mitsuji couldn't blame the sheepdog. After all, he had also thought of selling her comrades to keep herself safe. However, even though she was now hiding right under the church's noses to stay hidden, she feared the sheepdog would find her one day. But that was another story.
絶対に言わない約束よ。破ったらあなた、顔がなくなるからね。
Swear you won't tell anyone. Break it, and I'll tear your face off. Very well. It was a contract. Mitsuji knew the superior was a considerably skilled Jinx user. Thus, you should assume the restrictions had already come into effect. It was like they had each other at gunpoint. Mitsuji gulped, smiled, and steeled herself once more.
脱出組の家畜は確認されているだけで34名。そのうち成功例が7名で、あなたもこれに含まれる。
There are 34 confirmed fugitive cattle. 7 of them are successes, and you're one of them.
加えて、学会の襲撃のギリギリ前に若干名の子供が施設から連れ出されてると、わずかな証言から推測されている。
On top of that, we've surmised from the little testimony we've obtained that there were a few children who escaped from the facility just before the academia's attack. The pastor had predicted the attack, which meant that the children they'd put priority on setting free behind closed doors were kids with the potential to be ideals. Amongst all the kids impounded by the project, only those who showed signs of jinxes were called cattle. There were 3 types of cattle: successes, failures, and ideals. Due to the abnormal education the children raised in the Salvation pasture received, there was a high chance of them displaying a DD and obtaining a jinx. But that didn't mean they'd always get the jinx they'd been aiming for. Those who obtained jinxes that followed their concepts, those that possessed the specs and ability to achieve worldwide salvation, were called successes. Those who developed jinxes that either went against their concepts or clearly didn't match up to the level their concepts had been aiming for were called failures. From what Mitsuji knew, there were about a dozen successes, including herself, while there were supposedly many times more failures. But even the failures had abilities that could prove useful for some project or another, so they were kept in the confines of the pasture's facility. Most of them were ignorant detainees who had successfully seen the end of the project in the recent attack by the academia. Mitsuji had heard that after that, they were all executed alongside the children who hadn't shown signs of jinxes. Oh, cool, awesome, just wonderful. This inhuman and unprecedented measure had become well known in their world and had sparked massive debate. But that was besides the point. Though they were called successes, that didn't necessarily mean that they were successes for the overall project. For example, the concept of the sheep was to bring salvation through dreams, but it was clear that didn't necessarily mean perfect salvation. It was merely something like euthanasia, eternally delaying the moment the physical world ended in a subjective world and immersing in a blissful dream was not true salvation. In fact, all the current successes could only bring about dystopian salvation such as that. Salvation meant as a stopgate measures gathered to prepare for the coming end of the world. Okay. Okay. The successes were stopgap measures with a high success rate, but a low salvation rate. Conversely, the Salvation Pasture Project had also been undertaking the creation of deity, even more complicated and delicate, yet capable of attaining true salvation. Those were ideals. As they were wrapped up in as much secrecy as the sheepdog, Mitsuji barely knew a thing about them.
わからないわ。その子たちについては、計画自体のざるっぷりからは考えられないほど情報統制が効いている。
I don't know. The info regarding these children was so well suppressed, and it's hard to believe it was part of the same project.
しかしきっと、恐ろしく重要な子供たち。他をすべて投げ打っても、計画のために逃がしたかった子たちでしょうから。
But that means they must have been important. After all, they wanted to let them go for the sake of the project, even if it meant throwing everything else away.
脱出組狩りが一段落したら、牧羊犬はその子たちを探すことになるでしょうね。
Once the hunt for the fugitives passes its first stage, the sheepdog should end up searching for those children. I see. So I just gotta lay low until then, huh? But if that kid was an ideal, did she get separated from the helper who fled with her? Was there even such a person? They were treating her so carefully. Her helper should have been plenty talented in their own right. Like a skilled failure cattle or something. Would someone like that really do something like leave a child in the middle of the mountains like it were nothing? And more than anything, Mitsuji had a question. The girl she'd seen for just a moment in that great dream had become reality didn't look the least bit like a powerful ideal. Special jinxes were linked to special diabolicities. Shouldn't ideals be kids who were clearly abnormal? That idyllic girl looked only like a failure at best. And sure enough, Mitsuji's superior was regarding her pensively, as if she had the other answer.
今から言うことは、私が独自ルートで知るに至った情報。今の段階で、絶対に出回るはずのない情報。
What I'm about to tell you is something I found out through my own personal sources. It shouldn't be common knowledge in any circles right now. Quit lording it over me. You're not gonna back out now, are you? Not when you've come so far.
4月に失敗例の家畜が一人、学会の拘束を振り切って逃走した。
In April, there was a failure cattle who broke free from her restraints, but escaped from the academia.
それはちょうど4歳くらいの子供だったらしいわ。名前は確か。
It seems she was exactly 4 years old. Her name was,
黒ヤギ。
the Black Goat. I've heard of it. A failure that grants salvation by returning one to the womb. I've heard it had a fatal lack of capacity. But wait, weren't they all massacred? You mean those guys were all bested by a child?
どうやら学会側ではデータ採集のため名簿をごまかして 居残り組たちを囲ってたらしい。調べた後、殺すつもりで。
It seems the academia faked the register of names and took the detainees into custody for data collection purposes. They planned to kill them once they were done.
だけど、ええ、黒ヤギは想定以上に危険な存在だったみたいね。
But, yes, it looks like the black goat is even more dangerous than we imagined. However,
学会行為の研究者が数名、全身をバラバラにされて殺されてる。
several of the academia's top researchers were chopped to pieces. You serious?
おそらくは、本人に比してかなり強力なアバターを持ってる。その上、くそ、なぜ気づかなかったのかしら。
He probably had a considerably powerful avatar. On top of that... Damn it! Why didn't I realize it?
生き残った連中の中には、精神をやられ、ジンクスを喪失した者もいたようよ。これってまさに。
It seems where there were those who suffered mental breakdowns and lost their jinxes. Could this be... Well, that settles it, yeah? That jinx was a concept based on a myth of a black goat of darkness from some mythology that devoured and rebirthed all in creation. That girl, who had been declared a failure due to her limited stomach capacity, probably possessed another perfect ability. In other words, that black goat was... The black goat devours diabolicities. She had eaten the diabolicities of all those present when she'd escaped the academia. And after she slipped into Fujiyoshi, she'd gone on the run again, and devoured Rikaku Uematsu's diabolicity.
幸か不幸かわからないわね。羊と黒ヤギがニアミスしてたって事実は。
I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's a fact that the sheep and black goat just barely missed one another. Yeah, you're right. What would Mitsuji have done if he'd recognized her as the black goat? Would she have abandoned her mission to the church in helping the people of Fujiyoshi to take her and flee? Or would she have presented her to the church for self-protection, offering cheap compassion along the way? That was a pointless supposition. I thought Jinx users didn't cross paths for no reason.
ええ、無意味じゃなかったのでしょうね。
Right, which means there was a reason. Are you saying it was necessary for the black goat to escape?
さあわからない。運命論は私も嫌い。
I wouldn't know. I hate fatalism.
ただ、簡単に捕まってしまわなかったということは。
However, the fact she wasn't simply caught means...
嫌な予感はしちゃうわね。
I have a bad feeling about this. What about you? The black goat was still on the run. And while concealing an exceedingly powerful jinx in her diabolicity, the problem was that it couldn't save the world. If she kept concealing it as she grew up, perhaps it would become a threat that could rival that of the imaginary wolf. No clue. Mitsuji didn't know. To a Cadon fugitive like her, he didn't know if a monstrous entity born into this world like that was a bad thing. Mitsuji Misamine, through activities in the outside world and meeting with Haruaki Fusaishi, knew that the project was inhuman and abominable. They even called the innocent children they turned into monsters for the sake of the project cattle. That girl who'd been born with a heavy burden to bear and had been abandoned by her fellow cattle like Misamine and the sheepdog was unmistakably miserable. Didn't she have the right to take revenge on the world? And wouldn't Mitsuji herself be condemned by an entity like that girl for running away without lending a helping hand? Wisely, the adult in Mitsuji avoided answering those questions and pushed them aside.
黒ヤギのことはここだけの秘密ね。でないとあなたの正体がバレるし、上役である私の責任追及も免れない。
Let's keep all this about the black goat between us. Otherwise, the truth about you would get out, and I'd be investigated as your superior. Yeah, after all, you did a rather dangerous character slip through your fingers with that oversight in the list.
あなたのせいでもあるでしょ?
That was your fault too, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. Maybe I already knew and let her go.
もしそうなら、あなたはもっと動揺してるわよ、羊さん。生きがってるけど、本来は小心で純朴でしょ、あなた。
If you really did, you'd be more shaking up, sheep son. You put on a brave face, but deep down you're timid and honest, aren't you? Shut up.
黒ヤギか。その子にも会ってみたいわね。
The black goat, huh? I'd sure like to meet her. I'm sure you will. You're already pretty deep in this after all. The bond between jinxes would likely bring them together eventually.
今後ともよろしく。
See you later. Yeah. Her superior now gone, Mitsuji turned back to the PC screen. She deleted the threatening walls of text she'd written, and quickly began typing the fake story she'd been ordered to type up. This kind of report didn't matter anymore. To Mitsuji, the incident had only just begun. He was sure of that. Alrighty. Yes. 6 years later, violent and terrifying criminals known as the Black Goat Septuplets became well known in the world of superpowers. Alright, just slap that on, okay. After this, the Church successfully made contact with the Black Goat behind closed doors, and the power dynamics in the world of superpowers shifted even further. PPS. 4 years after that, the following conversation occurred in the corner of a provincial city. Is everything in order? Yeah, but for someone who used to be your ally, you sure did take care of them pretty easily. I don't see or feel the need to draw the lines between enemies and allies at the scene of a murder. It dulls you, and is more trouble than it's worth. Huh. What an annoying way to put it. In any case, I'm grateful. Thanks, though I'd say Mi-chan and the others deserve the most credit. Anyway, you should go to your sister's place. I have no choice. I'll have to stay out of school for a little while. Roger, leave the printout and notes to me. Are you okay with that? I'm asking if you're okay not going after him alongside the others. Well, we should let the two who went forward back then take lead now, don't you think? Not that any of that matters. How annoying. Oh well, it's fine. I prefer those who are more mature, composed, and craftier myself. Well, you got the last one at least. Yeah, I guess. Just how many were tricked this time again? It sounds like you have a specific person in mind who matches that criteria. Usayuki-san! That's a weird name. Forget it. You're not even interested, right? Yeah. So annoying. Later, then. Later. Of course, this conversation wasn't written in any of the church's records. It would be a little while after this that the black goat and sheep would meet again. Alright, so I believe that's probably a setup for a future game. Let me double check. I can't remember if I looked into that before or if it was brought up. So yeah, there was a mention of the developer announcing another wolf game called Depth Loop. Is there anything more? Of which there is a teaser trailer that came out on September 25th. Alright. Well then, that'll be it. This was a fun adventure, and thank you all so very much for joining me. Once again, Happy New Year's to everyone. Hope you have a wonderful time zone wherever you are. Toodaloo-hoo!